Yesterday I did a video entitled The Quran and the Rise of Science, and I drew very heavily on this marvellous book, Lost Islamic History, Reclaiming Muslim Civilization from the Past. And if you don't have a copy, strongly recommend you get this if you've not already read it. And the author points out how Islam itself orders the acquisition of knowledge, making scientific research an act of worship, and how there are numerous verses in the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet that emphasize the role that scholarship has in the life of a pious Muslim. For Muslim scientists, just a few hundred years removed from the life of the Prophet, seeking God's pleasure seems to have been the main reason for their research and their studies. Scientific literature from the Golden Age of Islam, commonly begins with Quranic verses that encourage seekers of knowledge and call on Muslims to reflect on the world, on the universe around them. And I want to extend that thought today by looking at the author's comments on astronomy. And after a section where he talks about the huge Muslim development of advanced mathematics, he talks about how formulas and methods developed by Muslim mathematicians laid the foundation for the study of the stars, while Islamic belief provided the motivation. See, faith is central to the success of early modern science. Numerous verses, he writes, in the Quran allude to the heavenly bodies and their movements. Regarding the sun and the moon, the Quran states that, quote, they move by precise calculation. Furthermore, it states that through the stars, mankind can be guided by them through the darkness of the land and sea. For an empire of faith that stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to China, allusions in the Quran to the mathematical nature of the heavens were too much to ignore. With the Quran as a motivating force, Muslim astronomers were the first to truly develop this science. And this is a really important point. In ancient times, astronomy and astrology were one and the same, leading to erroneous scientific beliefs about the impact of the stars on the daily lives of humans. And we still get this today in horoscopes that people read online or in newspapers. Muslims were the first to separate the science of astronomy from the guesswork and mythology of astrology. So Muslims were the first to make that distinction and set astronomy on a proper scientific footing. With the footage of leading caliphs like Al-Mamun, as an Abbasid caliph, and the House of Wisdom, which we discussed yesterday, astronomers were collected to study the ancient theories of Ptolemy, whose work was seen as a final word on astronomy until Muslim times. The key aspect of Ptolemy's ideas was the geocentricity of the universe. That's the universe is motionless and everything revolves around it. This motionless theory of the universe started to come into question when Muslim astronomers realized that the calculations Ptolemy put forth for the movement of the planets and stars were flawed and needed correction. While many simply created more accurate formulas, some began to question Ptolemy altogether. And in the 11th century, the really famous scientist Al-Biruni proposed that Ptolemy never fully proved that the Earth does not move in a scientific way, and that it may in fact spin on its axis. According to him, this would explain why Ptolemy's calculations were off, since he did not take into account the Earth's motion. While the rotation of the Earth was never fully accepted by Muslim astronomers due to lack of definitive evidence, it was certainly debated among the scholars of the Muslim world. Those debates found their way into Europe, specifically through Latin translations of the works of Al-Madriti, really important figure, an Andalusian scholar who focused on revising and perfecting astronomical tables and calculations. Even after his death, the learned classes from all over Europe would travel to the Muslim state in Iberia, that's in modern Spain, to study the works of al-Madriti and others. Eventually, as the Muslim ideas on astronomy disseminated throughout the continent, scientists such as Copernicus and Galileo would build upon them to come up with the theories that we now accept as fact today. Unlike European astronomers, however, Muslims would not be harassed by the religious establishments for their views. Scientific endeavours were seen, after all, as a form of worship. This is a very important point here, because we know the Inquisition, the famous Spanish Inquisition, targeted Galileo in Italy for proposing his views. And in fact, he was threatened with torture and he was under house arrest, I think, for the rest of his life. Such harassment didn't happen to Muslim scientists for the reasons mentioned. And then just in conclusion, there's a fascinating thing here about the Astrolabe. Like algebra, astronomy would have its practical applications. One of the most important was the development of the Astrolabe. And this is an instrument first invented by the ancient Greeks. Its purpose was to determine one's latitude by using the stars. It combined the capabilities of the astrolabe with the more precise astronomical calculations provided by Muslim scientists and became a staple of navigation, particularly by ship. By holding up an astrolabe at the night sky to calculate the position of certain constellations, a navigator could determine his precise location and compare that with accessible handbooks that listed the latitude of known locations throughout the world to help set a course to a specific destination. Travelling to Mecca, for example, for the pilgrimage thus became much easier for the Muslims travelling long distances. For a civilization that stretched from Spain all the way to India, technology such as this, which made travel easier, was indispensable. The astrolabe revolutionised sailing and was in use until the 1700s as the standard way of navigation, until the 1700s. So leave that there. But again, astronomy is strongly motivated by the Quranic injunction to observe and study the world, the cosmos, and science itself, the practice of science, was seen as an act of worship by the God who created the universe. Such an important and central motivation, I think, explains the great success of Muslim science over those centuries. There are other chapters which I may look at on medicine, on geography, and on physics, etc. And we can see the huge contribution made by Muslim scientists over those centuries, and how their knowledge was passed on to the West, to Northwest Europe principally. Until next time.